You mind if I look around?
Go ahead.
Good, thanks. Oh, you're fine.
Outside.
Oh, you're fine.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In this episode we deal with the first stop of the Cadaver dog in the basement. Now you may recall in the episode we did on the oxycodone, I used a reference image of what appears to be a medicine bin in the basement, bearing in mind what said that that's where he got the oxy from the basement in the bin, remember? And I remember when I used that image just thinking, where did I get that image again? Which officer got that image and under what circumstances? And in this episode we'll be answering that question. We'll also be sort of addressing an aspect of the case that has to do with criminal psychology and true crime rocket science to some extent, although it's not really rocket science, it's kind of obvious, which is this idea that Shanann was killed in her bed. Now if we take that literally, if that's true, then the cadaver dog should have alerted in the Watts bedroom. There's absolutely no interest in the bedroom upstairs. One obvious reason for this is a murderer who is acutely aware of getting rid of evidence, and Watts went to a lot of trouble to go to Survey 319 to get rid of his family. He wouldn't want a crime scene in his own bedroom. That would immediately and directly implicate him. His first original version, if you can remember, wasn't that he'd attacked Shanann, but that she and the children had simply vanished. Even in his statement when he finally confesses to Shanann's murder, he's not specific where he attacked Shanann, but it's not in his bedroom. When he does eventually go into that, his version is that he attacked Shanann on Cece's bed, right? And so, if anything, there should be some kind of cadaver alert in Cece's bedroom, because that's where Cece dies, and that's also where Shanann was supposed to have died. Regardless whether you want to accept or reject these bogus confessions, the fact is that the dogs don't really alert anywhere upstairs. There are a few little signs of interest, for example in the laundry room and at the foot of Bella's bed, but other than that there's not really a lot of interest. There's also a little bit of whining by the sort of stairs, sort of under the stairs, but again that could just be the dog being excited. There's also a little bit of barking outside on the porch. Again, it's hard to actually be certain what is going on with this dog, whether that's just in its nature. So before we follow the dog down into the basement, please subscribe, like, share this through your networks, and leave a comment. Please make sure when you leave a comment to leave comments that are to do with the subject matter. You know, a lot of these videos are focused on a particular issue. Please also try and focus on the issues that we're dealing with. If you'd like a discussion about something else, you can ask for that, but we're not really going to discuss that, you know, in different videos. Another aspect just to bear in mind is it's the rule of this forum and at crimerocket.com not to use all caps and lots of exclamation marks. We like to have just calm, reasoned discussions. Obviously if you can't do that, then you probably shouldn't subscribe to this channel, and you know, it's probably, you'll probably be happier somewhere else. So if it's difficult for you to, you know, abide by a simple rule like that, you know, it's probably best not to be part of this community. I'd also just like to ask the members who want to be part of this community and who know my work, respect my work, just to help me to police these forums a little bit. I'm finding it quite hard to do that. There's just quite a lot of sniping and just, all that kind of thing. It would just be good if you guys could let me know. I don't know who the bad apples are from other forums and the sort of loyal minions of various people. You guys would know that better. So if there's someone who is stirring and all that kind of thing, if you guys could just let me know, it'll be easier for me to just root them out and get rid of them. Okay. We want a forum here that's just a safe place for people just to discuss, have sensible and reasonable discussions. I've got no problem with people disagreeing. Just do it in a polite way without barbs and so on. And yeah, let's just keep the discussions as relevant as we can on the particular videos. A video is intentionally specific, and so let's try to keep the discussion specific to what we're talking about, and not sort of make it about the creator or what somebody else said. Let's try and make it a discussion about the evidence and about information and about the discovery. Let's discuss the case. That's what True Crime Rocket Science is all about. Okay, and so without any further ado, let's get going. So once again, just to reiterate, when you follow the dog handler through the Watts home, there's not a terrible amount of interest from the dog anywhere. When we follow her down into the basement, it's a totally different story. So let's do that now. So it's unfortunate that we don't have sound here. I do recommend that you go and listen to the original video. I've tried to download it, but my browser is saying it's going to take 21 hours because I've got other stuff uploading. But anyway, even if we follow just the soundless footage, we see the handler step into the basement, and immediately the dog draws her right. And where is she facing? She's facing the medicine bins, right? That's right where the dog leads her immediately, and the officer then immediately cottons onto this, and this is where that screen grab comes from, is where she gravitates to the medicine bin, right? And we know that this is where Watts went to around about this time. Now, some of you might argue and say, no, that's a lie, he never went there. Well, according to the dog, it looks like that is where he's following a scent, right? The other aspect that's quite interesting is when the officer pans to the left, where's the dog? The dog is by the refrigerators. Now, it's really frustrating watching this video because a lot of the time the body cam is sort of in kind of a horizontal, it sort of has a horizontal perspective, so you never really see the dog. And it's really unfortunate because you really want to record exactly what the dog's doing, his tail, his mannerisms, all that kind of thing, and you end up just never being able to see the dog. Okay, now we're going to refer to a couple of screen grabs. Again, the audio of this is really compelling. You hear a lot of barking from the dog in various parts of the basement, including beside the medicine bins, beside the refrigerator, beside the luggage against the wall, the pink suitcases, then sort of around the corner, the dog barks again. At the bed, the dog also barks, and then it shows a lot of interest in the area sort of right beside the stairs, kind of where the router is. But before we get to that, I just want to show you an image that's very, very hard to get hold of, just because the body cam, as I say, never seems to sort of point downwards, and when it does refer to this particular part of the basement, it's very quick and again not really in a downward trajectory. When we look at this image, we see a couple of things. One of the things we see is the location of the medicine bins to the exit of the basement to the stairway. We also see a gate which was used to keep Dieter kind of prisoner or wherever he was kept. But that's kind of, I mean, one could say that's a pet gate, but it's also a child gate. And there's also one of those at the top of the stairs leading up to the upstairs bedrooms. There's also a gate up there. But it's in that area, sort of shaded slightly blue, where the two red arrows are pointing, where there was a heck of a lot of interest from the dog, and that is actually where the handler sort of paused and sort of looked at the Officer Lyons, and kind of said, the dog is upset. She said it quite a few times. And again, I'm not very happy with the way that this is done. It's not really even recorded in the discovery, the specifics of the dog alerting over here. It's just not done in a very clear way. It's not described exactly where the alerts were, and what kind of alerts they were either. If it's a strong alert, whatever. I've covered cadaver dog alerts in other cases, and in this one it seemed not very well done. Officer Lyons does an incredibly good description of her experience moving through the crime scene, but in terms of the dog, it would have been good if she could have, or someone could have sort of taken a note and even drawn a map, taken a blueprint of the basement and shown sort of with, say, X's or something, these were the areas where the alerts were. And maybe that evidence is somewhere, but it's frustrating that it's not clearer than it is. You can hear the dog barking quite a lot, and so the dog does seem to be alerting. But it's specifically this area that it seems very interested in. It seems to jump over some of the boxes in that front line. It seems very preoccupied with this area, and this is also where the handler stops, as I say, and looks at the officer and says, the dog is upset about something. Even those words aren't really the ideal terms to use in terms of alerts. You shouldn't be saying the dog's upset. You should be saying this is an alert and the alert is here. Be specific about it. You can imagine if this evidence was led in court, you really want to see the dog. That's the sort of principal actor here. You want to see what the dog's doing. You want to see how the dog moves through the scene, and you also want to see the handler, but the handler is responding to the dog, so you really want to get the dog's movements and then the voiceover of the handler. You don't really need to see the handler's face. You don't need to see the handler when she's talking. You really need to see the dog. The dog is the guide. And so it's also intuitive if you think about just the layout of the home, and you think about the logistics of someone who wants to hide away bodies prior to transferring them and then transporting them to a faraway location. Hiding them in the basement makes sense, but it doesn't make sense to hide them sort of very far from the entrance. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense to carry the bodies all over the basement. I mean, there are windows in the basement, and the whole point is to get to put them out of sight, but then also to have easy access to them the second you step into the basement. Time is of the essence for Chris Watts, so it would make sense that he maybe laid them down or put them close to the stairway. What's also unfortunate, obviously we can't seem to pick and choose what we can know in terms of the discovery, but it's unfortunate that we don't have an inventory of what was in those medicine bins. What we do know is that Shanann suffered from lupus. I know some people don't believe that, but especially on her Twitter feed, there are countless lupus groups that she's following and involved with, and not one or two or five, but easily a dozen. That's a lot. So I don't think that is. I don't think Shanann would be following them if there wasn't a reason for that. And I don't think there would be pain-killing medications to this extent if she wasn't suffering from it as well. Bear in mind it's an autoimmune disorder, it's a chronic illness, and a typical classic treatment for it, because of there's a lot of pain and inflammation associated with, is opioids, is oxycodone. It's a classic pain-killing medication. And then I just want to refer you to the area where the router is. It's immediately as you come down the stairs to the left, and that is another area where we can have expected Watts to have moved towards. And the reason I say that is, and I must apologize for not being clearer in that unanswered questions video. One very likely explanation for why there's no doorbell footage of Watts leaving his home, walking on the driveway and all that kind of thing, is as soon as he turned off the router, that doorbell footage would be disabled. And Watts is very careful and conscious of all these kinds of things, and so it stands to reason that he would have turned it off. It also stands to reason that as soon as he arrived back at the house, when Officer Coonrod was there, do you remember that he very quickly went into the basement? He retrieved data, but it may also have been that he turned the modem on, because it would sort of raise a question, why is the modem off? I don't know about you, when I leave home I don't turn the modem off, and so somebody doing that, it would certainly raise questions. On the other hand, we must also look at the fact that there seemed to be an alert from Nicole Atkinson while Watts was at the service site. Now I'm not 100% sure, I would have to review my notes in the discovery, but I'm not 100% sure whether he was getting that from the Ring doorbell or whether he was getting that from Vivint. But either way, that sort of suggests that the modem may have been on. So we can't necessarily say that the modem was turned off when he left. Another possibility is that he turned it off while he was loading the bodies, and then he turned it off very shortly before he got into the car and drove away. Bear this in mind. A modem takes quite a while to connect, so you could turn it on, quickly walk out the last time, get in the car and drive away, and by the time it's connected, it wouldn't sort of show anything. So again, I'm making a couple of assumptions, but the point is, it is likely that Watts moved in that area to the modem during the period that the crimes were executed, and the dogs are possibly alerting to this. If Watts had picked up feces, right, and he's walking around this area, the dogs would certainly be sensitive enough to pick up quite a spectrum of smells, and so it makes sense that the dog is alerting in this area, not necessarily to cadaver odor, but to odors that to the dog are standing out. Now, I don't like to conflate cadaver odor with any other odor. I prefer a scenario where you have a cadaver dog that only alerts to cadaver odor. That's it. But there seems to be a dog that alerts to trauma. Again, I would like to cross-reference the it would be good to cross-reference the alerts from Cody, the trauma dog, the Labrador retriever, with those from Dax, the black German shepherd. There did seem to be some corresponding, if that's the word, between Jeff Hibbett's dog at the bed and also Jane's dog Cody at the bed. And that does make one wonder, what is the significance of the bed? the bed is in quite a far corner of the basement. There's also a window sort of opposite the bed. You've got the sort of Minnie Mouse, that pink Minnie Mouse thing on the sort of near the gym equipment, but opposite that is a window, and that's sort of got a long view into the basement. So it's not, it wouldn't really be ideal to, not that you can necessarily see with line of sight inside, but it does make one wonder, could Watts have maybe carried one or both of his children into the basement, perhaps when they were unconscious, and smothered them there? That is certainly a possibility. Again, I don't really put too much stake in the idea of killing someone in your own bed, because you're then almost putting a signature onto the crime. But it's possible that Watts did do that. It's possible that the children were unconscious, and he was transporting them there while they were still alive, with a view to dealing with them later on. And he didn't want them upstairs in the house if somebody happened to visit, which I guess was a possibility. It could be that, or it could be that Watts took something from the crime scene, something like a plastic bag or something like that, and sort of disposed of it or stored it sort of in the bed area. It's difficult to say. It's difficult because we don't have a very clear view of that part of the basement. Okay, and we're just going to go through a couple of slides showing showing Jane looking down at her dog, at Cody, and we can see the modem in the background. We can see the staircase rising to the left. We can see that this is an area where the dog was definitely very interested. Probably the most interest shown anywhere in the house was this particular area. We can also see that there are containers that are sort of put sort of backwards from the staircase, so it's quite a sheltered sort of area in terms of the basement. And then there was also an area of sort of kind of vertical containers that the dog also seemed to show interest here. Now again, we don't know what was inside these containers, if it was cleaning compounds, whether they were cloths, but for some reason there was definitely interest here. Now it's entirely possible that Watts stored whatever he used during the execution of the crime. Remember, the handlers are coming in on Tuesday mid-morning or so, right? So it's possible that on Monday night Watts emptied out whatever he'd put in there, and it could have been who knows what. He could also have changed the layout of the refrigerators. What's really interesting is the dark refrigerator has kind of a large area. The top part of the refrigerator is a large area where there's nothing. That's certainly a space large enough to fit potentially one child, bearing in mind that the children were stuffed into oil tanks. What is the chance that Watts would have stuffed them into the refrigerator? I don't know what to make of the interest in the sort of corner. It looks like there's sort of Christmas decorations or something in there. It's possible that one of those containers were used for something, who knows. But certainly if you consider those containers, they are, and I apologize for the thought, but they are just large enough probably to fit a small child in, obviously curled into a sort of fetus position. And in a weird sense, they are like mini coffins. They are like child coffins, and that would be small enough to carry, but also small enough to sequestrate their remains from Watts himself. The other aspect is if he removed any of those containers and then got rid of them, we'd have no way of knowing just because there are so many of them. And he did refer to placing containers in his, he backed his truck into the driveway, into the garage, and he spoke about loading tools and loading containers. He also talked about packing a plastic lunchbox. So why wouldn't he have packed some of these containers but containing his children's bodies? And you wouldn't want to carry anyone outside when you've got such long line of sight with, the Watts home is at the end of a T-junction. You wouldn't want to carry anyone's body outside with that long line of sight you've got with potential neighbors who could be not being able to sleep or looking out their bedroom window and seeing all the way down there. So I don't imagine Watts would have carried someone simply in his arms. I'm sure it would be in a sheet or in a container like that. Okay, and that about wraps up this episode. There are a couple of blogs on Crime Rocket that expand on some of the thoughts and ideas mentioned here. One of them is sinister signals from the router in the Watts family murders and what it might mean. That's on Crime Rocket. Another one is 2 possible cadaver dog alerts that have been overlooked, and none of those have got to do with the ones we've mentioned here. And then just to familiarize yourself with the discovery documents, there's also cadaver dog alerts inside 2825 Saratoga Trail, 29th Tranche. Please do go and listen to the dog barking in the original footage. I will try to find it and upload it. Well, I have found it just to upload it. I'll try and do that at some stage. But some of it is already on YouTube. Just do a YouTube search for cadaver dogs and I'm sure you'll find it. But just listen to the incredible activity of the dog in the basement, of Cody in the basement. And that's this episode. If you found this episode interesting, please subscribe, please share amongst your networks, like, ring the bell, leave a comment. Bear in mind there's a recently published book on the Watts case that includes the third confession. It's called Silver Fox, the Third Confession. I'm slowly working on compiling the second book in the trilogy. That'll be out maybe sometime in December, depending on how things go. But otherwise, thank you for listening, and I look forward to your feedback. Ready.